This is MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show devoted to the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Brian Searl and Kara Sismadia. You'll hear from special guests that focus on topics to help your business succeed, all backed by Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. David Smith joining us right when I'm trying to do my intro here. You threw off the whole rhythm, David. Brian Searl with Insider Perks. Excited to be here with you for another glamping-focused episode, week 2. Super excited to have our recurring panelists here. Zach is here. David's here. Hopefully, Ruben will be joining us. Connor Schwab couldn't make it this week, and maybe Irene Wood will come too. They just like to pop in and surprise me at random intervals. That was the best one, though, David. Like, you hit the timing literally like right as soon as the intro ended. So good to have David here. And then we've got a couple special guests with us too. So Sharen and Tony Turner, I got to look at my notes and cheat here, right? So Sharen and Tony Turner are from Glamping Retro, and they're going to talk to us about their one-of-a-kind amenities, their glamping business. And then we have Adrian, is it Passos? Have I pronounced that right? Passos?
It's Passos. It's Passos.
From just outside of London, right?
Yeah, so we're Royal Tunbridge Wells in London, and this is my wife, Claire.
Nice to meet you, Claire. Thanks for joining us as well from Caracol Glamping. So they're going to talk to us a little bit about their operation over there. I miss London already. Like, I'll tell you, I was there for the Christmas markets in December.
Oh, wow.
Well, I flew into London, and then I went to the Hyde Park thing, and then I went all over to see the other Christmas markets in Germany and France and stuff, and came back to London.
Yeah, good time.
Yeah, I liked it. But I want to explore more of the countryside in England. That's my goal.
Okay.
So,
come and see us.
Yeah, come visit.
I'm getting there as soon as I have time. So, all right. Well, what's on before we get to our special guests? Let them introduce themselves. What is on anything come across your desk, Zach? Since you haven't been here for 2 months, anything that you feel is important, or David that you feel is important we should talk about? No pressure.
I think the only thing I would say is on the development side. We've been so heavily focused on kind of the southern United States, especially southeastern United States. And it seems like recently, I just keep getting more and more inquiries from northern states, northern areas, things I think most people wouldn't have on their radar for glamping. Yep. And it's brilliant. We just wrapped up development on a property in New Hampshire. We got full unanimous zoning approval, and we've been having some investment discussions, and that was why here, why this area? Well, because there's nothing for 100 miles anywhere around. So a lot of those northern states are kind of catching up, I think, and becoming hot areas for glamping. So that's been kind of surprising. But I'm excited about it.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you think that that's specifically related to the perception that maybe the Northeast is harder to get permitting for because they're heavily regulated or more heavily regulated? I mean, that's what I've heard.
I think in the beginning, somewhat, yeah. If you're a developer, investor, you got a choice between low-hanging fruit and an area that wants it and encourages development, and an area where maybe it's going to be a little more difficult. Obviously, you're going to focus your resources on the ones that can be done quickly. But I wouldn't say that some of those areas are really that difficult. Our experience so far, and maybe it's our approach that we take it a little bit differently. But I think for the most part, most of these sites, the counties have been very excited about it, and anything that brings tourism and a draw, or gives people a unique opportunity to experience something different, or will bring people to their area. Overall, I would say our reception has been really, really positive everywhere that we've looked at. I think the bigger factor from an investment perspective is how seasonal is it? I think the perception has been, it's northern states, it's cold in the winter, you're only going to be able to operate 5 months out of the year. And part of that has been a challenge for us. We do look at different types of units and different, take a different design approach to it.
Yeah.
because it's still possible to do year-round glamping even when there's 2 feet of snow on the ground. But we do have to be a little more creative and look at those unit types and I guess experience different. But honestly, it opens up a whole new world. I think a lot of glamping resorts, especially when it comes to amenities, they kind of look at the same things, right? You're going to have hiking and mountain biking trails. You might have, water that you can do kayaking on. That's great. But every well-appointed glamping resort that's out there has those things. Where else can you go and rent a snowmobile for the day and go out and ride, 40 miles of frozen lake and shoreline and come back to a nice warm glamping hut? Where else can you take a moon bike out for an hour and feel what it's like to jet ski on snow? So I've been really excited about some of these projects.
Let you have but just forget about Canada. It's fine.
I'm preaching to the choir, telling the Canadians that we can glamp in winter, and they're going, duh.
No, you're not wrong though, right? And to be clear, I don't think that the permitting, just briefly going back to that, is the actual issue. I think there's just maybe, from what I heard, right, and it was more campgrounds, RV parks years ago at some of the Northeast conferences, there was just that perception that maybe it was a little less business friendly, but I don't think that's really the case, as you very clearly indicated.
No.
Or maybe it's just your approach and Clockwork is amazing and everyone should hire you.
Well, I like to think that we're good at what we do.
I mean, of course you are, right? So, okay. So let's, David, anything on your list that we should talk about?
No, I mean, I think for me, I'm always, as you know, I always really try and zoom out and think about, where glamping is, outdoor hospitality is within the context of the broader travel tourism market and cycle. And I mean, I think in the last month, we've sort of seen more evidence of what I was talking about on our last call, which is that the market is kind of turning a corner. And in the US, we've had there's really just been this incredible run in drive to leisure in general, whether you're in the Northeast or where I am in California. A lot of these drive to markets have just had really unbelievable rate growth, occupancy growth since the early days of COVID. And there's always been this question about, what is like the new normal. And I think we've seen more evidence in the last month that things are normalizing, and that data is showing up everywhere. I think RV sales are down something like 50% year on year versus last year. And then, more on the glamping side of the industry, or sorry, not on glamping, but just in kind of drive to leisure in general, we're definitely starting to see occupancy and rate and RevPAR, as they call it in the hotel industry, leveling off in places like Napa, Sonoma, and some of the, even some of like the really hot vacation rental markets, like in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So demand is leveling off, and I think the question now is, where does it restabilize at? And I think that'll be a really important question for, for the space that we're all involved in as well. But, I think all of us on this call we've talked about previously, I think it's important to be aware of that stuff. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is for your own business, is what the local dynamics of your market are and whether you're delivering an experience that's differentiated and will stay relevant in, whether it's a good market or a bad market or a great market.
Setting yourself apart.
Right.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and I just want to touch on it briefly, and then we'll get to our special guest, because I read an article. I know some of us, I think, Zach, you AirDNA before? We've heard that. I've used it. So I read a report. I think it wasn't about our industry, glamping, but it was about vacation rentals, as you just touched on, David. Specifically, I think it was citing an owner on the Jersey Shore there, right, where it's normally big vacation rental area. And they've had an Airbnb for a while, but they talked about how this summer it's just not filling up and they're not getting the guests, and it's not. Do you see that as a broader indicative trend for glamping as a whole, or is that vacation rentals specifically cooling off? Or you know?
Well, I do. Yes and no. I think it is relevant to glamping in the sense that if you think about vacation rental demand as at least being kind of somewhat related to leisure travel demand in general, I think it is partly. I think it is due to the same thing, the same reason why hoteliers in some of these drive-to markets are also seeing a drop off in room rate. This time year versus same time last year. But I do think there's also, like, I'm not an expert on the vacation rental market, but I think there's been a lot written about that sector becoming oversupplied in certain parts of, certainly in the US. There's just been an absolute frenzy in vacation rental development or conversion, or investors buying homes, converting them to, basically like permanent Airbnbs. So I think that there's that, like, in that sense, the barriers to entry in some parts of the country for vacation rentals are a lot lower than the sort of stuff we all deal with. And so, that oversupply issue may just be kind of specific to vacation rentals. I think it probably is.
Because it's easier to start an Airbnb than it is to start a glamping resort, of course.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're in, some of the more accommodative parts of the US where no one really, like, the county's not going to get in your way if you want to do that. So, yeah, as always, it's impossible to tell, but I think it's both a reflection of the market, but also probably something specific to vacation rental world too.
Okay.
Two things that I would add to that, and reasons that it's important within the glamping industry that we pay attention to that. One, we're starting to see areas where there's sort of collateral damage to the glamping industry as a result of short-term rentals. As an example, we were looking at a property in Colorado with a development client. Would have been an incredible property, great location, close proximity to several ski resorts, year-round opportunities there. And the county that's there recently instituted kind of some reactionary policies due to the problems that have been created from the short-term rental market. There are no longer any cheap rental houses. All the seasonal employees, everybody that works at these ski resorts, they come up, they rent a house, they put 15 people in it, so they're each paying $300 a month. All those cheap, affordable properties have been snatched up by speculators, turning them into short-term rentals. So now they have a workforce housing problem. So they've instituted registry for short-term rentals, and they grant licenses to use your property as a short-term rental. Some of these states and counties have even gone so far as to subpoena sites like Airbnb and say, we want all the listings that you have on your platform in our county, and then issued fines to those property owners for having, an illegal short-term rental due to their new regulations that they've passed. Other counties have issued a moratorium and flat out said, we don't care what it is, we're not approving anything that would be a short-term rental, a short-term stay for the next 2 years until we get a handle on all of this. And like it or not, those policies and those moratoriums and some of those reactions from areas that have been inundated by the short-term rental markets are having an effect on the glamping industry. And having some of those counties come back and say, yeah, we realize you're a glamping resort, you're camping, all of this, but you're still charging a nightly rate. People aren't staying here long-term. You're not renting it for the month. This classifies under our new designations as a short-term rental. So I think it's important to keep our finger on the pulse of that. The second thing I was going to add to it, and sometimes I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but I think it makes it all the more important that within the glamping industry, we understand that we are not in the business of accommodations. Like, everybody say it with me, glamping is not about accommodations. Glamping is about a hosted experience. And so when we compare, looking at that saturated market, we look at, rentals that are dropping off, why are we not seeing that in the glamping industry, or should we be worried in the glamping industry?
Because you offer a unique experience.
Right. And I think, eventually, yes, we're going to hit a saturation point in this industry as well. But the thing that's a differentiator for a glamping operator or resort is that you are offering more than an accommodation. And so the thing I think that's going to make this a more resilient industry, as opposed to just, Airbnbs or short-term rentals, is that piece of it. So if you're a glamping operator and you're not offering anything more than accommodations, then yes, you should be worried. But I think a majority of the properties, especially very unique properties that are out there, they're focused on a specific landscape feature, an activity that can be done, beyond just the usual stuff that we see. But that's the business we're in, is experiential hospitality. And I think that's what differentiates someone who's seeking a glamping adventure versus, someone that's maybe just looking for a place to stay for the night.
Do you think that, and I apologize, Adrian and Carol, Sharen and Tony, I promise I'm getting to you. I didn't intend to go down this kind of direction here, right? But I just want to finish the conversation. Do you think that in some ways, this problem you're describing with people with an oversaturation of vacation rentals and how it might or might not impact glamping, obviously it is in Colorado, and certainly it's not hard to imagine that it's impacting it in other districts, cities, states around the country that are dealing with the same kind of influx as that area was. Do you think that in some ways an economic recession or reset or whatever's going to happen to us here, however small or big, might end up helping that in some ways, because it will reset some of the over embellishment or zealousness or zeal, I guess, I'm trying to look for the word, that people are just coming in and buying these houses at inflated prices and renting them out at inflated prices. Do you think that helps perhaps long-term our industry?
I'm trying to find the best way to give the politically correct answer on this. I view it more like a Pandora's box. In the U.S. at least, where government doesn't typically get smaller, things get bigger, and so I think once that regulation is out there, I don't see it being rolled back or repealed. It may adjust, it may eventually become a little more friendly, but.
That's what I think I mean is the adjustment, right? Like, because right now, as they said, like there's a hard stop for a year or 2 years. But if we go through a period where there's a lot of rentals that exit without even legislation, and there's not as much, like I think maybe that helps us in 2 years get a differentiating, like maybe an addendum to the bill or an addition that says, glamping is a little bit different or experiential hospitality, right? I don't know. It's speculation.
Yeah, I think. And honestly, I'd be interested in hearing Adrian's perspective on this, because, again, in a lot of ways, I look at the U.S. glamping industry as somewhat still in its infancy, right? We're in the first 10 or 15 years of this kind of trend. I know the UK especially is a lot more established when it comes to that. And I'm sure they're on the backside of that very question. But I do think, as the industry becomes more established, as people become more aware of it, more familiar with what it is and what it isn't, I do think that, not necessarily a repeal, but I think there will be more public support for people stepping forward and saying, look, that's not what this was about. This was about Airbnb. This was not about squeezing out this, couple that wants to build this wonderful place that would be an incredible experience and bring people to our area. So yes, I think, like all government, we have ebbs and flows. We swing one way and we swing back the other. So I think we'll get there, but I'd be interested in hearing, kind of a deeper industry perspective from Adrian on that.
Well, look, the UK planning process is incredibly difficult, as it sounds as if it is in the US. We went through a year-long process, and literally our business is small. We've got 8 bell tents in a 3-acre field, and that is it. It is a small business. The process that took to get through was a 140-page document to the local council. And a year-long process, and we have to jump through all sorts of hoops. So it's incredibly difficult, and I think that's just governments across the world are probably got the same things in place. It's just incredibly difficult trying to get a glamping business off the ground.
Do you think that's because our industry is newer still and they just don't understand it, or
it's not that new in the UK though, is it?
Right, that's what I'm
No, that's why we're asking.
Yeah.
So in the UK it is quite a saturated market, and there's loads and loads of different unique offerings like tree houses and glamping sites and cabins. There's so much out there. And during the pandemic, a lot of people were jumping on the bandwagon and just setting up glamping businesses, but they didn't necessarily have anything unique to offer. So I think they're sort of falling by the wayside as demand drops. So yeah, it's quite a volatile market in the UK, I think, as well.
So tell us a little bit about Caracol Glamping.
So we set up 3 years ago. It's been a long process. We were both working full time last year. So this is our first full year. So we eventually got open in April. Again, it's a seasonal business. Our license only allows us to open for 6 months of the year. That's part of our planning conditions. And obviously climate as well in this country is you'd only really want to be camping where we're located. We're in a historic town just outside the historic town of Tunbridge Wells. We're linked to a local farm shop, so we've got a local connection there. So any people who are visiting our site, we encourage to visit the farm shop to encourage custom buying local. We're in an area of outstanding natural beauty. It's a really nice spot. We've got lots of castles, historic information locally to us. We've got a really good location, but business is tough, as it is everywhere.
So tell me, how did you get in? I'm just curious, how did you get into glamping? Was it like a thing that you always wanted to do? Were you just on like the tube or a double-decker bus paging through a magazine? You're like, yes, that's what I want to do.
No, we just like the outdoor lifestyle. We've said it for many years that we love to set up a glamping business, and we never had the opportunity before. We didn't have the finances in place, and we were looking to see how we could do it. And ultimately, we put an advert in the local farmers union website saying we're interested in setting up a campsite. If any farmer is interested, get in touch. And luckily enough, one guy said, I've got this area of land. Come and have a look and see what you think. So it's we couldn't afford to do it any other way than that. So he gave us the opportunity to be able to set it up and establish ourselves.
What would you?
So I've got a quick question on that. So did you acquire the land? Are you leasing the land? Are you doing a revenue share back to the landowner?
It's a revenue share, more or less. So we set up the whole business. He's put the infrastructure in place. So toilets, shower facility, he's paid for and invested in. And we've invested in all the tents and associated equipment. We've got a big stretch tent up. We've built a sort of an indoor-outdoor kitchen area and a little sort of snug that we've invested in. That's the way that the partnership's working.
Do you feel like, and I'm just curious hypothetically, right? Because that seems like a good model that works well for, not in every situation, right? But in your case, it works well for the landowner who probably wasn't utilizing the land as much as he could have.
Correct.
Do you feel like if you did it all over again and you had enough money to buy your own land, you would do it the same way? Would you still lease the land, or would you?
In an ideal world, you'd have your own land, and then you wouldn't have to pay the farmer rental. So
yeah,
that's what I'm asking. I didn't know if the partnership had other tangible benefits that just working together.
Having said that, the infrastructure, we've got a sewage treatment system in place. All of those associated is a huge cost, and that would have been, our setup costs would have been vastly increased from what we have had.
Do you feel like, I'm trying to think of a good question. From your advice perspective, and you said you've been doing this 3 years, right?
Yeah, it's our first full year. So we'd done a pop up in year 1, and second year, year 2, we didn't get open because we were still building the infrastructure. So we only had like a 10-week period.
Okay. Would you say that just advice to other, and I'm curious from a UK perspective, right? So you've been through this, you're still obviously building it, you're on your way up. From an advice perspective, if you were talking to someone in the UK specifically, given the saturation of the market and maybe where the economy is headed, what would you recommend? Like if they were you're not trying to talk them out of starting a glamping business. If they're dead set on starting one, what would you recommend that they do to make sure that they have the best chance to succeed?
We haven't succeeded yet, so the jury's still out.
Okay, I haven't succeeded either, so nobody here has succeeded. Maybe David and Zach have.
My advice.
I would argue you're open. That is success. For
Fair enough.
a lot of the folks that.
Right. It depends on
a lot of folks
right?
that we work with are in that process, right? So that is the eventual goal: is can we just get open? After that, you worry about all the next problems.
Then you become more successful and more right? Yeah. So you already are.
Oh look, we're enjoying the experience, but it's tough. It's really tough, and as new business owners, I've been employed all my working life, so we've really sort of jumped into it with both feet and see how we go on. At least we can go back and we said we were going to do it. We've done it. We're having a great time, but yeah, we'll wait and see what happens in another year.
So what would you say?
I have a question.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to make me answer the question, but if you have a better one, then we'll just forget mine. That's fine.
I was going to ask to our earlier discussion, kind of focusing on the experiential based piece of hospitality. What are things that you guys have done at Caracol and things that are a unique opportunity for guests at your resort? We're starting to get more and more inquiries about kind of ag experiences, farm to table, incorporating animals, whether that's sheep or goats or cattle. So I'm curious, being as your site is on a farm, what are those experiences that you guys are offering, and what are you finding is resonating with your guests? What's differentiating factors for you in your business?
Well, our location is key. Like I did say, we're in a historic outskirts of a historic town with lots of history. Henry VIII's castle is literally a couple of miles away. So there are lots of historic attractions nearby to us. The site itself, we've built this kitchen this year. It's really nice. Everyone who comes to visit say, well, it's better than the kitchen I've got at home, or the shower is better than the shower. So we've sort of, it is upmarket. Is it glamping? Is it posh camping? We think we've established something that is different. Other campsites and other glamp sites haven't got this indoor kitchen. They haven't got this indoor lounge area that we've set up.
But I think more importantly, because we're on a farm, we're all about biodiversity, sustainability. We're also located in an area of outstanding natural beauty. So for us to get through our planning application, it was key that we ticked a lot of boxes. So all the bell tents are nestled in a wildflower meadow. We've upcycling, we're reusing materials. We've got a little nature area with bug hotels and bee hotels. And we've got woodland as well behind us. So it's really, really key to us that we tick all of those sort of biodiversity boxes. And we had to do that to get through planning.
Which I think ultimately goes back to Zach's point of experience, right?
Yeah.
It's not, and just as you talked about, is it glamping? Is it something else? We've had those discussions too. I mean, who knows what the word is? All we know is that people tend to search for that on Google right now. So that's what we're for ourselves for now. David, I'm curious from your perspective, and maybe just have an opinion on this versus expertise. Is there value from a capital investment standpoint in a partnership like they established? Or is it something where you
mean like a revenue share style partnership?
Just if you're looking at it from an investment standpoint, or I'm going to lend money to them, is there a value in having two people with different strengths that complement each other, or would you rather have one person who maybe knows the business and is learning the land?
No, I actually think that when you look at glamping as an industry, that the hardest thing for people, one of the hardest things for investors to find are teams that have experience and all the necessary skill set to make the project work. And that's not very surprising because it's a new industry. It's almost impossible to have had decades of experience in glamping because it hasn't really been a thing at this scale for very long. So I think actually being able to show a partner that you've got, even if you don't have that decades of experience that everyone wants, you've got a team that have got different skill sets to bring to the table. Yeah, I mean, of course, that's absolutely valuable. And then, I think where I thought your question was going about, how do you actually structure the deal, and does that make a difference from the investors'
Well,
point of
if that was a smart way to take the question, that's absolutely where I was going.
No, it's a different question, but I think it's a good one too. I mean that absolutely makes a difference as well. That obviously the advantage of a revenue share or a lease is that a lease is really like effectively just a form of financing. It's if you sort of look at like a land lease through a certain lens, it kind of actually looks like a loan. Someone's giving you the land. You don't need to put the capital up, but you do need to pay them rent for it. A rent, which is kind of like a loan, and a revenue share is not all that dissimilar again. So I think that can be valuable to an investor because it means the return on capital opportunity is higher because you just don't have to put up as much capital. But it also means that, if things go wrong, you don't really have, you may not have valuable collateral in a way that you would have in a more traditional real estate project. So
to add to that, what we hear on a lot of those types of projects, they can be very attractive to potential investors because the upfront capital raise is not as significant. But this would be a question maybe Adrian, you guys haven't gotten to yet since you're just launching, but when you start asking about an exit strategy, what is the long-term goal with this? Was it to grow the business, to grow multiple sites? Was it to sell the business eventually? Was it, and so it's always a question that comes up with investors is I'm willing to put my money out into this, but how do I get it back? When do I get my cash in, my payday? And a lot of times on a land lease deal, there's just less there at the end. And so there is an investor profile that is not interested in land lease deals. I've even had traditional real estate investors say, we want to do this glamping resort here and now, but we know that 10 to 15 years from now, this is going to be a much more attractive site for a lodge or for a hotel, and so they're looking for really a short term, something that's going to generate revenue, cash flow, but it's a means to an end. It's to get them to that bigger end goal piece of a more established type of development on that property. And so if you're trying to make that pitch to real estate investors, that they see the greatest value is in the land, it's in the property itself. So I mean, it's a question back to you all. What is your long-term goal for Caracol, and what is that thought? Is it to eventually be able to buy the land and continue doing that, or kind of perfect this model and then find future partnerships, other lease potentials that you can do the same model over and over, repeat it?
Yeah, longer term, we've got different. There are options available to us. So initially, we set up with 8 bell tents. Is there potential to put lodges, something that we could run for a whole 12 months and increase our income that way? We don't know. So we are in the early stages, but there are options available, and there's also options at looking alternative sites in the local area where we could set up the same business model as we're currently doing.
I think it's all about setting up a really good brand, which I feel that we have. It's only sort of 18 months old, but I think we're getting a really good name for ourselves locally. And I think one of our unique selling points is that we're predominantly a group space. So which not that many glamping sites and campsites offer an opportunity for groups to come together and just have, exclusivity of that space. So I think as we grow our brand and, awareness of what we're doing, there is the opportunity to expand to other areas.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I want to give Sharen and Tony a chance to talk here since they've been super patient with us. But before I do, Horizon Outdoor Hospitality is the sponsor of the show. I always forget to do this at the beginning, sometimes in the middle, and then they get pushed to the end. It's not just Horizon, it's everybody. My brain is just 25 different places. So super excited for Horizon Outdoor Hospitality to be a sponsor of our second week glamping show. They are focused on, as you can see, elevating assets in the outdoor hospitality industry with their RV park management glamping resort company. Scott Foos and his team do a great job there. So definitely I would encourage you, if you're looking for something like that for your business, to reach out and give them a shot. So, okay. Sharen and Tony, Glamping Retro, not retro glamping.
No,
I keep wanting to call it that. Glamping Retro. How did we get started?
Well, we actually, my wife and I had moved to East Tennessee and everything, kind of semi-retired, and our daughter and son-in-law was a few hours away, and we were over there one weekend, and they said, "Mom, Dad, if you guys start a business again, we'll move closer," because they had our first grandchild.
Oh, what a carrot to dangle in front of Mom and Dad. That's mean.
Yeah, that's it.
We don't want anything to do with you, but if you open a business.
Yeah, you open a business. So lo and behold, 3 years later, we come up with the idea here, and we put it together and looked at what was going. We originally were actually looking at a campground and developing a campground, and then we said, the thing popped up, and so we have an Airbnb also that we'd worked with, and so my wife says, "Why don't we look at the glamping thing?" So we did, and here we are, and they've moved closer, and it's a family business we're running, and we do the glamping, but we also kind of being diversified. Adrian mentioned about it, doing groups and everything like that, like corporate meetings where they can come and get together and everything. But we're actually set up where we do a wedding venue, and with it as well. So we're not just solely, relying on the glamping side of it.
So tell me, what sets Glamping Retro apart? What is the experience that people are having here?
Location.
I don't know where you're at. You got to tell me. Like, I probably could. If I was the smart host who did his research before actually popping up here and just talking, then I would know. But sorry.
So we're 45 minutes north of Asheville, North Carolina, and we're 30 minutes south of Johnson City, Tennessee. And basically, Gatlinburg's like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours from us.
Yeah, that's a beautiful area, Tennessee.
Yeah. We're on the northeast side. We're up. We're right in the mountains. When I say, we're a little over 3,000 feet up. Our facility is, and it's up there. We've got waterfalls all over. There's swimming holes there. We've got the Appalachian Trail that's there. Of course, we've got whitewater rafting. There's just a lot of activities in the urban area, and the development here has been developmental board here has been real accommodating. Wanting new businesses like this. And been very welcoming, for us and everything. Unlike, I know Adrian and it sounds like they had a lot of struggles in getting started. Ours was much easier, receptive, I should say.
So tell me, I'm going to give you a hard question here, right? And just because Zach mentioned it too. So like everybody's got the hiking trails and the waterfalls and whatever else. So is there something that you put your hat on that Glamping Retro is or wants to be?
Well, I think is the personal touch that my wife actually does with everything that's there. There's I don't want to give it all away, but there's just a lot of small personal touches. We have honeymooners that come in. We have newlyweds or families or whatever like that. It's putting all the little extra things in. When kids come in and everything like that, put kites into place and We have 16 acres. There's 9 units up there. We have 3 houses, 2 airstreams, and 6 safari luxury tents. All the tents and everything have full bathrooms, full kitchens, everything. We have mini splits on all the units. It's not all. I take that back. All but 2 of the tents. 2 tents we still have rustic. Those 2 of them there, primitive. It's all right on Spivey. We have a creek that's there. That all the units are backed up to the creek, and then we've got a pond that we dug out, and a little waterfall there. But then there's actually larger natural waterfalls.
Okay, very cool.
For the personal touches, I think that's what people have commented and have really, the little touches that are done there. I mean, she puts makeup remover stuff. It's just everything, it's just like you left.
Yeah, the little things are what add up and make the experience. We
just tell them, bring your food and your clothes. That's all you need. Everything else is there.
And, the guests are pretty shocked because we have soap, shampoo, conditioner. Basically, all they have to do is bring their food. And we have very luxurious bathhouse, kind of like what Adrian said, just really nice. They say, oh, this is better than our house. And so just put those personal touches to make it more upscale and more glamorous for the people that love the outdoors but don't really want to sleep on a sleeping bag or a blow-up mattress.
It's really interesting to me, and I'm sure that there's going to be a point where this has to change too, just like the accommodations do. And maybe Zach, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about this too. Clearly, you go above and beyond for the guest experience and for the little things. But and so this isn't. Don't take this the wrong way, right? But it's very interesting how the bar is like, oh, there was shampoo, and that impressed me still after X number of years, right? Like, shouldn't it have leveled up by now into a kite or a whatever? But it's interesting. Do you think that changes with saturation as we continue to go forward, or? Yeah,
I do. It plays very well into the discussion that we had earlier. As the glamping market becomes more saturated, I remember 2 years ago when it was good enough for someone to pop a bell tent in their backyard and they were pulling down $150, $200 a night on Airbnb and going, oh my God, this is brilliant. Why didn't I think of this sooner? But I think as the industry establishes itself a little bit more, as we start to see some of kind of those more industry brands, I'm so glad Passos mentioned their efforts to build a brand, because I think that's really, really important. I think, that competition in the marketplace drives places to be better. And I think Sharen and Tony are being really humble. If you look at their website, you look at their Instagram, this site is absolutely gorgeous. The property that they build is really incredible. My favorite thing.
I'll share it while you're talking.
My favorite thing that I saw is your assembly space, your Quonset. I think, again, when we start talking about tying experience back to accommodation, right? And you guys hit the nail on the head. Weddings, events, group gatherings, giving people a place to come, because that's really what you're selling. You're selling that memory. You're selling the experience. It is all those little touches. It's the very first thing I said, right? We're selling a hosted experience, and those are the things that perceive value to a glamping client, right? It's not that you gave them shampoo. It's that you thought about it. You thought about them. We've all had that, even in nice hotels. And I travel a lot. I've seen a lot of hotels, and you get in the shower and you look over and you're like, oh crap, they put it across on, you get out half dripping wet, to go get the shampoo, right? Because it's not where you expected it to be. And so I think it is all those little touches that show you've thought about your guests. You've thought about their experience. You've done little things to make sure that they're having a better experience. And so, when people ask, like, what's the secret sauce? What's the magic? How do I do a successful glamping resort? There is no magic bullet, but if I had to narrow it down to one thing, it's just that. It's being attentive. It's thinking about your guests. It's not one thing. It's 1,000 little things that you're doing. and Sharen and Tony are absolutely hitting it out of the park.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. We've got our daughter and son-in-law that they do the social media side of it. We're kind of, well, you've seen the troubles we had getting logged in, so that'll they're very much responsible for all that side of it, and thank God for them. So we're blessed, so.
And like it or not, whether it's fair or not, right? A big part of this business is telling your story, and it's not just targeted Google ads and traditional marketing, right? Like social media is a huge part of this industry and what we do, and so that ability to communicate your story of what's happening through social media, it's a huge contributing factor to success in this industry.
Yes.
So where do you see your Sharen and Tony? Where are you guys headed in the next few years? And then after that, we're going to show Adrian and Carol's website because it's only fair. So
ours, you mean for the unit itself? I think.
Well, yeah, for your business. Like, where would you like to take this? Do you want multiple locations? Do you want more units? Do you want are you happy with how it is?
Yeah, I think we're happy with with what it's doing and where it's at. Probably we want to increase. We'd like to see more increases. We just opened up for weddings to do weddings this year, and so we're looking at really trying to capitalize on the wedding side of it. And then we've got everything in our area. Of course, we're in the country, so everything in our area, is 99% barn type wedding. And so what we do have up there is completely unique and different, and the people have been very receptive. We're actually on wedding wire and the knots, and so the referrals and leads that we're getting there, and what's the other one, Honeybooks or something. So everybody that came there has been very, it's completely different, and so the wedding side of it, I think, is the glamping as well, but the wedding side, the increase in that will be advantageous for us.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's lots of ancillary income opportunities if you have the right land and the right experiences and the right. I think there's all kinds of ideas we haven't even thought of yet. Probably the UK has thought of everything, but we haven't thought of yet over here. So I want to take a look. Anything else, Sharen, Tony, that we should know about your business?
We are seasonal as well. We open in April and we shut down the second week of November. Typically, because we do get snow in this area pretty heavy, and then of course it's cold. Even with those the tents, we've got heaters in them and everything like that. But the mini splits, they just only so efficient when it's so cold. And the treehouse and the Airstreams are fine, but the tents are just difficult to keep warm.
Do you have to take your tents down every season?
No, ma'am. They're we've got solid tongue groove wood floor structures, and we got them insulated underneath and everything for our water lines and our electric and everything like that. And no, we don't take them down at all. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. And so I just want to be fair, since Zach had to go say their website's good. Zach, did you look at Caracol's website too, or did you just totally Adrian and Carol?
Very nice.
All right. I'm just kidding. But let's look at the site real quick, because it isn't thing. We probably should do this with special guests more often, where we just take a look at some of at least the visuals, right? Not necessarily the website, but
yeah.
So talk us through this, Adrian and Carol, June 22. I know you've talked a little bit about it, but just if you call out an image or see it, or what makes.
Yeah, so we put a big central stretch tent in. The picture on the right hand side is this little snug area that we've built. It's all upcycled materials. It's all old packing timber and that we've sanded and reused, and people like that we're using, just upcycling everything, cable drums for tables, scaffold boards for.
And there's kind of like the meadow, so we just mow paths through the field to people's tents, so that it creates a bit of
yeah, your own area
for each tent.
Yeah, and it's all it's planted wildflower meadow. It used to be the farmer had asparagus fields and previous to that. So and these are the facilities, real upmarket toilets and showers. They're nice. And again, local area, some images of the local area for various castles.
Well, that's curating, right? Curating the experience, like we were
Yes.
talking about, all leads toward this makes it easier for me to pull the trigger and stay here.
Yes.
Maybe I've never been
absolutely.
to this area of England, but now I know, right? So.
Yeah, and
All
I
right.
think
Thanks for putting that up.
seeing that big field picture too, it makes me think back to the discussion on the ground lease versus acquisition. I think that's one of the real benefits to a partnership, shared revenue ground lease piece is, when you're acquiring land, I think a lot of times you feel like I have to maximize this, right? I have to use every last buildable square foot of this because I have sunk cost in the acquisition of this property. And so now I need to build enough units and maximize my potential revenue by developing this entire property. And I think that land lease, rev share partnership piece where you don't have as much sunk upfront cost in the land acquisition, it gives you a little more freedom from a design perspective, right? Like there is inherent value in just being able to stare at that beautiful meadow and walking down those pathways surrounded, waist high on both sides. And so I think that's, maybe one of the unintended benefits, but
A different
real
perspective.
advantage to, just to having a little more land to work with, right? And not feeling like we're so burdened with the debt we took on to purchase this property that every last square inch has to be, rev share or revenue producing, that, it's okay to say, we're going to leave this 5-acre tract and its highest and best use is exactly how it is. It's just a pretty place that all of our guests are going to enjoy.
I think there's more to that too, right? So let's pretend that it was just the farmer who had owned the land for 20 years. I think the outside perspective, as we're talking about, changes how you imagine the glamping fitting in and how you, right? If you've been looking at that same plot of land, maybe you have a vision for it, but maybe it's not the best or the most creative because, right? And so I think that partnership also lends that to working well together in some cases too.
The farmer,
we
who
often
rented the land off, didn't have a clue. He didn't know what he wanted to do with it. He was leaving that
Right.
ground fallow for the next 5 years because you have to plant asparagus in cycles. So it was doing nothing. He may have put a couple of horses on to graze, but that was it. So he was thinking, well, how can I generate more income from this land? And obviously, that's where he said, well, okay, how
Right,
about?
but he needed you then, is my point, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
So I think there's value in just sometimes you hear the same thing with us working with marketing, right? Like I'm too busy, or I've never stepped back and look at my business from a 20,000 foot view, which is way more than marketing, right? But it's just that different perspective of that outside idea or conversation, or working with an architect or working with somebody like David from the Capital Experience. He's talked to so many different people. I think that's extremely invaluable, even though you can't really put a dollar amount on it.
I can.
Fine, Zach. Ruben, kill the end of the show. That was my grand crescendo and now it's over. I'm just going to turn off my camera.
No. I mean, to echo your point, though, I think it is important to get some of those outside perspectives. As an example, I was on a property last week, and there was one area that was really, it had incredible views out over the mountains of North Georgia, and there was a creek that was there. It was absolutely gorgeous, very, very picturesque, and the property owner that we were walking with, he said, I think this is the perfect spot for a really luxury, super elite, this is our presidential suite. It goes right here. And I asked him a question. I said, well, what if we made this something that was communal instead? So instead of selling this elite experience to just one or two guests, what if this became an area that was just open, kind of a communal gathering space where any guest on property could come down and experience this? Now we're adding that value to all of those stays instead of just one stay. And he's like, I've never thought about it that way. Like, again, it is kind of the greedy revenue. I'm a dollars and cents person, right? Like we're going to get this property and this is the best way, or this is the only way I've thought about it before, that this has to be some incredible luxury unit, right? So I think sometimes getting some different perspectives and having people say, well, what about this, or have you thought about this, kind of forces you to think about things in a different way.
I'm excited to see where the industry goes in the next few years and beyond here, right? Because you're talking about more of those people will come into the industry. More of those people will have the ideas like you're talking about, Zach. You'll have more of those ideas. David will have more of those ideas. Sharen and Tony and Adrian and Carol. But then there's going to be new ideas on top of that we can't even imagine right now, that come from the experience that's being laid as a foundation now. And I'm excited to see a future where those ideas come to life too.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, nobody else needs to be. That's fine. You can all just leave me hanging.
Well, what we're seeing too is over in the towards Gatlinburg and that area over there, you're seeing some of the more corporate sided investing into small rental properties, kind of glamping type stuff as well. Not just individual investors like wife and I, or homeowners. The corporate side is really is kind of jumping in the bandwagon as well.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit, but I think I got most of what you were saying. So, David, Zach?
Yeah, come here. Quick question for me I think another really interesting question about these businesses is always, how much are you, Zach was talking before about developing in New Hampshire, for example. There are beautiful places all over the United States and the UK. And some of those beautiful places are on the radar of the traveling public already, and some of them are off the radar, and some of them are at the edge of the radar. And I think that's kind of another theme, I think, in glamping and outdoor hospitality is, which is really relevant for the investor world, is how much are you trying to, induce demand, get people to come somewhere where they don't really, they're not really familiar with already, or there's not really a great place to stay, have a good experience already, versus how much are you kind of trying to go, fishing in a pond that's already well stocked, if you like, with visitors. And so that's something I hear a lot, is, we kind of feel like we're doing not just marketing for our property, but also sort of destination marketing for this entire area, because we're trying to help put it on the map. And I think that's a really, I think that's like a unique value add for glamping, because kind of like what you were saying, Sharen and Tony, I think there's probably a lot of places in the US where municipalities welcome that activation, because it helps create more differentiated experience that they can use as an advertisement for the whole area. But it also, it just means there's one extra piece of lift required for the marketing, that, the more boring kind of highway side motel doesn't really have to worry about so much, because they're just catching people because they're driving by. So I was curious, for both Sharen and Tony, and for the Passoses as well, how much do you feel like for your property, you're trying to wave the flag and advertise not just the property, but the whole area that you're kind of embedded within?
Well, we signed up to Visit Kent membership last year, just when we sort of started off. We were lucky enough in May to go to the Houses of Parliament with Visit Kent to, promote sort of sustainable tourism in the area. So that was a really good opportunity to meet sort of local stakeholders and partners in the tourism industry that are all trying to do the same thing to promote Kent as a destination. But yeah, marketing's tough. You've got to be out there partnering and networking and doing it all, even if only to meet local suppliers such as vineyards or people that produce things, so that you can offer your clients an experience. You need to know everybody around you, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, and we've only got we're over time now, but just as a nod to Zach, AI, because he was waiting for me to say it here, right? Like when you're talking about marketing, though, we've actually had this conversation with our clients. Now that you can use these new tools that allow you to be more efficient, we've talked about promoting the area and writing blog posts about the local waterfall that nobody knows or maybe doesn't even have a name yet, or the hiking trail, or where to go bird watching, or where to, right? And so all those things can now be done, I think, with a little bit less hassle and a little bit less time devoted, and allow you to kind of curate that experience. And I think that's even more important with glamping when people are looking to have that outdoors nature. What do I do in this 3,000 feet up on a mountain experience, right? So I think there's a big opportunity there for people who embrace that style of marketing with or without AI. Any final thoughts? Anybody else have anything? All right. Well, thank you, Adrian and Carol. Appreciate you being here all the way from London. I know it's late over there, so I want to let you guys go on time if we can. Sharen and Tony, appreciate learning about your experience up in Tennessee. I'm looking forward to maybe we can have you back later on for another update. And then David and Zach, as always, for your expertise, wisdom, and all the things you continue to share on a monthly basis. We will see you guys next week for another episode of Fireside Chats. Take care, guys.
Nice one, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of MC Fireside Chats, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara Sismadia. Have a suggestion for a future show or want to see your campground or company as part of an episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Join us next week for another episode. And don't miss the latest outdoor hospitality news and commentary from around the world at moderncampground.com.